Hello, everybody. I won't even say welcome from any specific platform today because I know people are watching us from all over. So we're streaming currently on Millennials Are Killing Capitalism, The East is a Podcast, Black Liberation Media, I Mix What I Like. Renee from Saturdays with Renee is here as well. Psychic Militancy and The Resistance is Fertile. And The East is a Podcast. Sina Rahmani is going to be joining us momentarily. He is in transit. Um, but, I just want to thank everybody for showing up for this. Obviously, thank all of our guests and everybody kind of come together for this effort. And thank all the people who are watching on, whatever platform that you are. I do want to just shout out all the folks who, are streaming this and just suggest that if you are not subscribed to any of them, that you add them to your media diet. I think that it's an excellent selection of groups. And also, I do want to specifically shout out Nora Barros-Friedman from the Electronic Intifada. We didn't go through the effort of getting an official EI endorsement, but so there, but Nora is an esteemed guest this evening as well, and it's always great to be with her as well. And then Louis Allday also, who I wanted to, I asked him if he wanted to put logos up, but declined. But shout out to Ebb Books and Liberated Texts for all of their work. And so it's really a great group of folks that we've compiled. And we're here for, I think, kind of a difficult discussion, in some ways, because Refaat Alareer is obviously, world renowned at this point. He has become, I think, in many ways, a voice, and, his words are synonymous in many ways with Palestinian resistance in Gaza. And, we have some guests here that can definitely speak to that. But people know, I mean, the poems and his literature has circulated really broadly. There are Refaat Alareer, libraries that have been set up at student intifadas. And, so obviously the importance of him as a public intellectual and as an educator and a teacher is, and as an author and a poet, right? We don't really need to explain that, I don't think, to most of the people who would show up today. But, there are still family members of his who are surviving the genocide in Gaza. And, I think it's really important that they be supported, and their support should be, in some ways, I think, related to, how many times we're sharing his words and how many times we're, invoking his name. And, I think to do anything less is a bit of a betrayal of, what he has meant to the people of Gaza and the Palestinian people more broadly, not just in Gaza or Palestine, but also globally, right? And so we just, for folks who don't know, his parents had a fundraiser, right, that was basically being run by somebody in the US. That person, I don't know all of the details of why or what happened within their personal circumstances, but basically they misappropriated funds from that fundraiser. And so the family is out to, I believe, around $20,000 of funds that were misappropriated. People are working with that individual to get back as much of that money as they can, but I think so far it's only about $1,000 that have been recovered. And so, we're here. There's a new link, right, that is in the show description. I'll pull it up on the screen in a minute as well. That is a chuffed campaign that's run by a very, an individual who's known to several of us, who's a very reputable person who's been doing fundraising for people in Gaza for the last couple of years. And it is going that she has already made the first transfer to Refaat's parents, right, from this fundraiser. And that's been confirmed and everything. So we want to give people, obviously, first and foremost, the opportunity to give to that. I'll put it in the chat as well. All of our sponsors will make sure, if it's not on their page, to add it as well to the show description. But that's kind of the main reason to come together, right? Is to ask people to actually really support them. But we also have a incredible group of people, and so it'll be a good opportunity to share some memories of Rifat, some reflections on him and his work, and we will probably, because of all of the conditions within the world, whether that be in Gaza right now or the West Bank or in Venezuela, or Sudan or the Congo. I'm sure we will find other things that we will also discuss this evening with this great group of folks. But mainly we did this because we want to make sure that we help make this right for Rifat's family, and so that's where we'll start. So I'm gonna pull up first Nora Barros Friedman from Electronic Intifada because of all of us, she had, I'm quite sure, the closest relationship with Rifat. Obviously, had a number of opportunities to interview him over the years and feature his work on Electronic Intifada. And definitely, I think for many of us, those, final few interviews with him after the genocide started in, post October 7th, 2023, are kind of seared in our consciousness, in our memories of him. And so, Nora, I just wanted to give you a chance to say some words and reflections and kind of start us off.
Oh, thank you, Jay. And it's so good to see all my comrades here. Um, I don't know what is there to say. I mean, I first met him in person in 2014 when he was doing his book tour for Gaza Writes Back, and I had been in touch with him beforehand, but it was just over email, and he was writing for EI. And after that tour, I feel like our our friendship got closer, and over the subsequent assaults on Gaza and these different periods of resistance. It was, a privilege, and always such an enormous honor to just be able to text him and like, hey, are you doing okay? Can I interview you for X, Y, and Z? I ended up interviewing him 5 or 6 times, I believe, between 2014 and 2018. And then we were just in touch until until the very start of the genocide. And then we were in touch every day, and it was like, I still haven't really processed his assassination. I feel like and this is true of so many people who become big figures in our lives, both personally and politically. Like there he continues to leave such a mark, and to be such a figure in terms of articulating the violence that Palestinians have been enduring for 100 years. He was not just this incredible speaker and writer, and scholar, poet, but he was also a dad and a brother, and he was someone who was incredibly funny and incredibly vulnerable. And I remember, in some of the last few days before he was killed, we were texting, and he, in all the years that I know him, I will always know him. He was always like, I would interview him when he was at the Gaza March of Return, the Great March of Return in 2018. And he was like, he was like, when he talked about seeing the crowds of people, thousands and thousands and thousands of families, and medics and colleagues of his from the university and people that he knew from the neighborhood. He was, he was so filled with so much pride and joy and defiance, and the way he talked about, his community, his people, where he came from, the neighborhood, Shujaiya, which is in eastern Gaza City, and how it was like this kind of iconic place where, the lions of Palestine were born and were cultivated and were supported. He had this like just very beaming, pride. And in the last few days before he was assassinated, we were texting back and forth, and I felt this, like he was still obviously incredibly proud of everything and everyone in Gaza. But there was this feeling of dread and of shock that the world, like really the world was just going to let this happen. And this was in the first 2-3 months of the genocide. We're in month number 27, 28, something like this. There was a shift in his tone, and I still feel so rattled by that. Like he knew, he could see, he had been through so many assaults in his short, way too short life. And he feared for his children and his family and his students and people who knew him. And I miss him. I feel like, and this is something that Ali expressed to him in day 2 of the genocide, when he was first on the Electronic Intifada live stream on October 9th, 2023. There's this collective and overwhelming feeling of shame that this happened to our comrades and our friends, and we couldn't stop it. And I remember the emotional state that Ali was in, and how we all felt exactly that. And I remember Refaat, encouraging us, those of us who were 10,000 miles away, like that this wasn't our failure, that this was the failure of the West, that this was not a failure, it was the intention of the West and its mission to destroy Palestine. And I live with this very heavy feeling of that shame still. No matter how much, Rafat tried to reassure us, when we should have been the ones reassuring him, of course. There is this sense of shame that will not go away and that should not go away. And I know Lara will have so much to say about continuing to feel these things, because it reaffirms our own humanity. And I think that, every time, I'll just end it here, every time someone else, every time, every day, when people are killed in Gaza, we're day 823, 24 into it. There's a part of me that, like, I'm not religious person at all, but I have this vision, and I've had it every day since Refaat was taken from us, that he's, wherever he is, he's like welcoming the kids and the parents and brothers and, the guy in the neighborhood, Abu Obeida, he's Yahya Sinwar, like he's there, and they're together somehow. And that, I don't know. I feel like his legacy is so, it's so immortal. It's so immortal. And being able to keep supporting his work and his family through this absolute hell of a Holocaust and a genocide in Gaza is the least we can do. I'm really grateful to be with you all here today, and for you, Jade and Sina, to be putting this together.
Well, thank you so much, Nora, for that. Before I go to the next person, that was great. But I do want to pull up the fundraiser so people can also see it on your screen. It should now be in the show description of, wherever you are streaming from. But this is the name of the campaign too, if you're looking for it on chuffed.org, financial aid for Refaat Alareer's family. So this is what we're asking folks to give to today. There is also, I do think it's good to say, there is also a fundraiser run by his brother, Adele, that is also in my show description, and I'll add it also. I'll send it to the other folks to add to theirs too, which has not been, defrauded. So you can also support his family through that as well. But his parents are the ones who have, right? And so that's part of why we're doing this in particular, is to try to help them raise back what they had already raised and can't access now. So Sina, do you have any opening thoughts you want to throw out there? Oh, you're muted.
Always a bridesmaid. I don't know. That doesn't make any sense. Hi, everyone. Sorry I'm late. I was setting up my camera, and I was also doing some very important winter maintenance on my car. I can't stress this enough, people. Get your car undercoated. It's important. You save a lot of money in the long term, saves your frame. Just think about it, okay? Undercoating. What was I talking about? Okay, no, we're here for something serious. No, thanks for doing this, Jay. Jay and I, obviously, he probably told you the story. We haven't done one of these in a while, and it's good to see you guys. I think at the outset, all I have to say is that it's crazy to me that we've reached this weird point where these things that we got used to as kids, I don't remember, maybe you guys remember, maybe we brought this up before, but remember those ads for all those Christian charities, like World Vision and stuff? Well, that, I realized in retrospect, there's this kind of weird, this sort of framework around that, whatever you want to call it, philosophical framework, is a kind of global adoption scheme where you adopt some rando from some global south country, and you're shown a picture and you watch them develop. And it's a very perverse, when you look back and you realize, oh, the CIA, it was a CIA front, World Vision probably, and God knows what else, God knows what other crimes it's part of, and that whole machine, because it's a huge, anything with that kind of scale of money, you have to be skeptical about. In Canada, we had some scandal with this scumbag brothers, neoliberal goons called the Kielburgers. If they hear me doing this, they'll probably sue me for saying their names even. So I'll just leave you with that information. They're just complete scumbags. And of course, it's always done under these auspices of global giving. And the reason why I'm saying this is that where in reality is that where in things that the ruling class, that's where the ruling class wants you to give your money, right? They want you to do that. They want you to sponsor a child or whatever. And those schemes are obviously deeply loaded, and they feed upon this obviously Western savior complex. but like that's what the ruling class wants you to do. They want these like nice, clean, well, obviously dirty charities, but that's neither here nor there. But I realized that like this is what's happened in the story of the Gaza Holocaust is truly unique insofar as like we are bandits in a sense, like to these companies. If it wasn't for Chuft, like God knows where we would even have these sites, because we've been basically like these fundraisers and have been basically like I don't know what the word is, besieged. Like Palestinians routinely, I remember at the beginning, PayPal would take their money, GoFundMe, there's all these stories and stuff. So if God knows, and that was before the advent of Chuft. Chuft popped up, I think, during all of this. And I think that's kind of how this started. But, throughout all this, but which is to say that like, the ruling class and the sort of global capitalist oligarch, PETA oligarch running it, wants these people to be starved into submission. And so it falls to us, like Westoids, people whose governments are responsible for this like historic civilizational crime, to fill in the stopgaps. And then you realize that like so much solidarity occurs in this same way, where people giving money to other people, because the rich, hoard so much money and they leave us with this kind of like little trickle. So it's, on the one hand, it's like incredibly depressing that we have to do this when there's so much money out there. But of course, they're choking these people into submission. So you're not allowed to go get it. Corporations aren't allowed to donate in the huge numbers. I mean, Ben and Jerry's, right? They like disown Jerry, I think, or Ben, I think, I'm pretty sure, even though they don't own it themselves. But like, because he was too pro-Palestinian. And that was like milquetoast, liberalism of that vein. We know what they've done to UNRWA. So all of this is to say that like there's a kind of perversity to all this, which is like, oh my God, it's fallen to us like nobodies to do this stuff. But on the second hand, like on the other hand, like, yeah, like look what nobodies have done. Like look how much money has been raised for these orgs. Like these are really important works. So I kind of have this, this kind of mixed feelings about all of this. But what choice do we have? Forget your mixed feelings. We have to raise money. So that's all I'll say for now. Thanks, guys. Thanks for everybody joining us.
Oh, shoot. Thanks, Sina. It's harder to move people on this tiny screen with so many of us, but let me kick it. I'm going to kick it over to Louis Allday because I just know that he has some great things to say. And for folks who don't know, Louis, he runs the Liberated Texts website. He is an editor for Ebb Books and Ebb Magazine as well, I believe. And, does a lot of wonderful work publishing and translating important texts, in various capacities. But a lot of your work, Louis, has been directly associated with the Palestinian liberation struggle. And, I'm sure that, I don't know if you knew Refaat. I imagine that you had some contact with him over the years, just given the nature of your work and the kind of similarities in some of the areas that you were working in. But I know that you have offered before, even on our live stream when we talked about Wasim Saeed's new book, some reflections upon the role of literature in resistance, and Refaat's belief in that, as well as his at times fear that it is not as adequate as he hoped that it would be, right? And so yeah, I would love to just hear whatever that you have to offer. Just really appreciate you joining us for this today.
Thank you very much, Jay. Yeah, reiterate what Nora said. Thank you, you and Sina, very much for putting this together, and to everyone else for joining. I mean, the way in which I knew Refaat kind of pales in comparison to Nora's genuine intimacy and friendship with him. We followed each other on Twitter. We interacted occasionally. Obviously, that occasional interaction has taken on greater meaning since. But I can't claim to have been a close friend of Refaat. But I probably don't need to tell anyone listening, you can form a real kind of soft spot or a real affection for someone, even just um, through social media, in a way that I think can be real and genuine in some way, somehow. And I distinctly remember the moment I found out that he had been martyred. And the moment it happened, it might sound contrived, but it's really true. Literally, the moment it happened, or within seconds of it, I thought of Ghassan Kalfani. Um, and I thought, which I don't know if I had before, but I just thought immediately about the parallels between them. And I thought about the words that Ghassan Kanafani had said about death, um, just weeks before he was assassinated himself. I think one of the first things I also thought as well is that both of them were killed with family members. They were not martyred alone. In the Refaat's case, I think it was his brother and sister and four of her children. And in Ghassan's case, it was his sister's daughter, Lamis. Because they really, they shared a lot of characteristics. I mean, obviously, absolute commitment to the Palestinian people and to the cause, a cause that both of them spoke about as a kind of universal human issue. And they both had this real urgent desire to propagate and record Palestinian culture and stories as a part of resistance. But both of them had an understanding or a belief in the righteousness of Palestinian resistance in all forms, i.e. very much armed resistance being part of that spectrum of resistance, and never doubting that, even if their respective role was more in the literary. They both had a very kind of they both had a humorous side to them, a kind of sardonic side, a real eloquence. And obviously that, in combination with their commitment to the cause, and in both cases as well, that their ability to express themselves in English, is exactly why they were a threat to the Zionist settler colonial project. Because obviously neither of them was involved in fighting directly militarily, but they still constituted such a threat that they were assassinated deliberately, as in, I mean, targeted. And of course, both of them understood very well the role of the role of literature and resistance, but also in the Zionist colonization of Palestine. As you know, obviously, Kanafani recounts in on Zionist literature, but Refaat also spoke about. There's a really good lecture of his that's on YouTube, actually. Maybe we can put it in the notes somewhere. And one of the things I really like about that lecture is he talks about how even people that are engaged in, for broadly speaking, kind of cultural or literary resistance, even he speaks about, have moments where you question its worth or its utility, or he gives an example of, she only wrote a poem. Why did they arrest her? And so he acknowledges that there's an occasional contradiction sometimes, and it's like he uses that lecture or part of it as like a reminder that we shouldn't be doing that. We know how important and how central it is, and obviously his commitment to that has taken on profoundly more meaning since his martyrdom. Because I think maybe above all else, what connected Refaat and Ghassan in my mind is that in differing ways, but in very comparable ways, if they so desired, a very different, much safer, more comfortable existence was available to them both, one way or another. Refaat was an academic. He specialized in English literature. He studied in Malaysia. As Nora mentioned, he visited the US. He had international connections and no doubt international opportunities. But where did he dedicate himself and his life and his career and his efforts and his love? It was in Gaza. If his objective had been to secure a different life outside of Gaza for him, and probably not just him, his family, it would have been possible, but he didn't do that. And I think, I think that's testament to his love for his people, which is, also reflected in Kanafani's position. Obviously he achieved perhaps more notoriety and fame after he was martyred, but by the 60s, several years before he was killed, he was a very successful novelist. His wife Annie, still active, still alive, brilliant woman. She's Danish. There would have been a very obvious way to get out of being in a very vulnerable position as a stateless Palestinian in Lebanon. Similarly to Refaat, Ghassan never did that. They were both faced with, I would imagine, I don't know their internal predicaments, but they could have chosen a safer, more comfortable existence away from the real front line of struggle, and neither of them did that, and they paid the ultimate cost for that. And I think the day after Refaat was killed, I wrote a piece which is more or less about what I'm talking about now, comparing the two. And another thing that came to my mind when I was thinking about the comparisons between them and that choice that they both made, it's reminiscent of Kanafani's unbelievably moving, especially considering how short it is, his short story for Letter from Gaza, which he wrote in 1956, which, if you're not aware of it, read it as soon as you can, and maybe even watch the recording of John Berger reading it at the Palestine Literature Festival several years ago. It's very, very emotive. But one of the phrases that sticks in my mind from that short story is, so it's basically a letter from one friend to another, and the person writing the letter has decided to stay in Gaza and to not take the opportunity of studying in America. And he describes his decision as choosing to stay amid that, and this is a quote, the ugly debris of defeat, to learn what life is and what existence is worth. And they both, that's the choice that both of them made. I just want to say something about why we're here specifically with this fundraiser. I suppose I want to say a couple of things about it. One is that obviously it's horrendous that this has happened, primarily for the immediate impact, which is the stealing of funds from people in desperate need. But there's the kind of broader issue that I really hope people do not think that this is indicative of the overwhelming majority of these campaigns, which are legitimate, are being managed, run, promoted, boosted by a really actually very small group of people on the whole. Just as I said that now, the quote of James Baldwin comes to mind about the world being held together by the love and passion of a very small group of people. And that's really, a remarkably small group of people are doing a hell of a lot of really important, in many ways, draining and unrewarding work. Thank you so much to Sanaz, who has taken on the task of actually getting the funds. she has been remarkably consistent and transparent and effective in getting money to people. So please donate to the new campaign, because it will get to them. And yeah, just to go back to what I said about hoping people don't think this is indicative, you know, a lot of people are, for various reasons, not many of them I think defensible, just flat out ignoring these fundraisers. I think there's probably all sorts of mental gymnastics going on there to do that, but in a very, very literal, immediate way, these fundraisers are keeping people alive, extended families, extended clans. And for me, there is something really, really quite fucked up about people who have spent the last 2 years tweeting, gaining attention, talking about Gaza, talking about Palestine, but then will not even retweet a single fundraiser, or let alone host one, let alone do something like this. And it's been a real struggle to get people with large followings who have built those followings in many cases off the back of suffering to engage in anything that, even though we know it's insufficient, even though we know it's not enough. I think someone said it's the bare minimum, and it is the bare minimum. In many cases, people will not even do the bare minimum. And I mean, I would imagine that people listening are not those people not doing the bare minimum, but these campaigns really are keeping people alive. It's really that simple. So please support this one. Please support other ones. Yeah, and thank you very much again, Jay and Sina, for putting this together, and much love to all the other people on the call.
Thank you so much, Louis. Beautiful reflections, and I agree with everything that you said. And, you know, also just appreciate how much time that I know you have put into, you know, supporting and boosting fundraisers over the last couple of years. It's, you know, it's wonderful work, but it is also, you know, time consuming and, you know, thankless in a lot of ways. And I do think that, I mean, I agree with you in terms of it's the least that we can do, but you certainly, I think, set a great example for all of us in terms of, you know, doing that work as you manage all the other things that you do. Um, just remind folks again, the Chuffed link is in the show description. We've already raised $1,300, which is wonderful. I think everybody, you know, or almost all of us have given, and we will continue to do ourselves on the panel as well. And you know, appreciate everybody that's watching that is doing the same. And I want to bring up Jared Ball for a minute here, because Jared, you have done a lot of work through IMIXWHATILIKE, through your work as a media studies scholar, through your work around Malcolm X and so on, to think about the question of colonialism, the importance of narratives of those resisting colonialism. And I think that there's a lot of overlap actually between your work and really the practice that Rifat engaged in, both as an author, as an English teacher who specifically, you know, took up knowing that English was the language of US imperialism, right? And wanting to communicate to people within, you know, empire, people who were backing, you know, Zionist colonialism in Palestine, to communicate what the realities were of that, and believed in its transformative, you know, believed in the transformative power of narrative and story and language and journalism too. I mean, he also, it's less said about him, but he was also a journalist, and, you know, his work with Electronic Intifada, you know, demonstrates that part of his practice as well. And another thing we haven't mentioned much that is maybe not, I mean, it's mentioned, I think, some by his students, but he had a reputation for being quite demanding, right? For expecting a lot of his students. Many of them reflect on that. You can tell in kind of a like, yeah, he put us through a lot, but it really helped us, helped us learn and get better, right? And as an editor, I mean, I was moved when thinking about his reflections on Gaza Writes Back that he it was an opportunity for him to publish a book of his own writings, and he deliberately said, you know, that, "No, what I wanna do is feature the work of a bunch of, my former students, of other people, other Palestinians that have stories, from the context of Gaza." And so there's also a really beautiful, I think, with him kind of resistance towards being treated just as like an individual spokesperson. I mean, he was a public intellectual and engaged in those ways, but he was really conscious, perhaps because of he understood from Operation Cast Lead and everything else, the kind of genocidal nature of Zionism and how it was responding to people in Gaza, that it couldn't just be him, that he had to like really raise up a whole generation or multiple generations of writers and thinkers. And there's something quite beautiful about that. And obviously it's part of why as Nora says, his legacy lives on and he feels like he's still here in a certain way. So that there's just some things for you to think about as as you chime in.
No, thank you. And it's an honor to join all of you and to be in solidarity with the work and in honoring Refaat, but and the struggle that he was struggling within and working within. So, and yeah, I definitely appreciate the prompt. There were, I was thinking about it. I am only really familiar with him, admittedly, just to confess my ignorance of him and his work through Electronic Intifada and Millennials, and if maybe but primarily through the people who already gathered here. Though I think Nora had to leave for a moment. And it was an honor to be able to so it's an honor to be able to come and show some support and solidarity. And as you were just talking there, and I was thinking about, focusing on the parallels would be weird and inappropriate. But one thing I will say, given what you just said, with that where we definitely, I definitely don't understand or vibe with him on is the difficulty he is in the classroom. Apparently, like my classes are much easier. Yeah. So I just want to get the students in the room and try to grapple with some ideas, and that's about it. And outside of that, my class is much easier. But one thing that I did think of, though, is that, to your point, I mean, I mix what I like, despite the focus or the reference to I is really about a collective, and it's an honorific even to the journalism specifically of Steve Biko and to the anti-colonial journalism and work that he did under the pseudonym Frank Talk in his column I Write What I Like. So beyond just being a pun about my own mixture and what have you, it's meant to reflect that ethic of using journalism and media making, and I mean journalism in the broadest sense of the term, to bring attention to and inspire people to join revolutionary organization and activity. So I definitely appreciated learning about Refaat to the extent that I did, and to again be able to show some support and solidarity here. And just again, my only real interest ever in broadcasting or media work beyond my professional career has been because of these traditions of what I learned about is as emancipatory journalism and this concept of using media making to specifically be part of radical organization and support those movements, and having that be the purpose of the journalism or the art or whatever have you. And a lot of my favorite individuals and all of my favorite movements have had media and journalistic arms, puns intended, and use them to that end. George Jackson obviously had, I refer to George Jackson's triumvirate of the need for an underground army, which, that's beyond what we're talking about here. But but he also talked about the purpose of having an alternative political party, but having a journalistic arm that was meant to help popularize the idea of revolution. So for me, these have always been guiding principles of the work. And Mumia, still locked up, and was a journalist, and we could argue had its parts, had a lot to do with his own political imprisonment, and the maintenance of him, the sustaining of him as such all this time. But yeah, so it felt very natural. I felt a definite kinship. I think I forgot exactly how it was being said earlier, but I felt that sort of stereotypical parasocial relationship in seeing him in his interviews and reading a little bit of his work. And I did want to, if I can, just quickly and lastly, further confess my ignorance. When I was trying to get somewhat prepared for today, and I was looking through some of his work, was there any intent by any chance that If I Must Die was at all a shout to Claude McKay? And has that been discussed somewhere? Because that was my immediate thought in the way they were both using their poems, If I Must Die, If We Must Die. And with Refaat's ending with him saying, if let my death be a tale. In other words, as I understand it, let it be part of the narrative that inspires an appropriate response. And so, yeah, so anyway, I, salute to him and his family, and to the struggle that he was involved in, and that ultimately gave his life to. And again, I'm honored to be here in solidarity with you all.
Thank you so much. To your question, I believe the answer is yes regarding Claude McKay. I don't know if anybody here can definitively confirm that, but I believe, I feel like he said that at one point. I think the illusion is too close for there not to have been some relationship, but I do believe, and of course that poem, if I'm trying to remember the context in which I'm thinking of, but Claude McKay's poem was used as like almost a chant during certain struggles. I think during perhaps phases of the civil rights, movement and things like that. So yeah. Lara and Benji, I'm gonna kick it to Lara first, but I would love for both of you, because you're both really engaged around these questions of psychology and, shout out to your new podcast, Lara, Psychic Militancy. But also, shout out to Resistance is Fertile. Of thinking about psychological, being a psychological warrior to a certain degree. And I don't want to say that in a way that people, and I'm sure you both can address this, people may have a very negative notion of what that means. And certainly when people are experiencing, psychological warfare from, an imperial or colonial power, it is quite negative, of course. But there is a certain, demand, I think, of people like Rifat, and I think he embodied this to an amazing degree, to, if you are engaged as a public intellectual in the kind of spheres that he was facing, facing a colonizer and an imperial system like he was, that you do need to be psychically strong and clear. And so, Lara, I'd love if you would kind of start us off on, maybe some thoughts on him within that realm.
Sure. Um, Thanks for organizing this, you and Sina. And I think, if this speaks to what Nora was saying about how he's immortal. It's so hard to organize schedules. And I think this came together, and I don't think any of us were like, no. And that says something. It says that folks are really committed to this, that we understand his power, we understand what it means to take care of his family across borders, that they're our family, that being in solidarity with folks doesn't mean, kind of like what Louis was saying, it doesn't mean you dip in and out. It means you connect and you make a relationship and you commit yourself to this. So I feel like this is a testament to that. I just want to say something quickly about the being hard in the classroom. And I found myself giggling over here because as an Arab, that's like the most basic thing. So I went to the American University of Beirut, and when I applied to graduate schools, the university would include a cover letter that explained that our 85 is like a 95 in the United States. I mean, it was just sort of like, you folks have it a lot easier. These students, we put them through the ringer. This is how we're trained. So I think there's something about that. But beyond that, I was thinking about Walid Daqqa and his writing, and like the commitment to a rigor, an intellectual rigor, which includes sort of moving beyond comforts, because you're living under conditions that don't afford you that. There are ways, there's a reason why Gaza has like the highest literacy rates. There's a reason why people are committed to education, because if everything else is circumscribed by the deathscape of the Zionist machine, including their every time Refaat had to leave, to apply for an exit visa from his own country, and may have been denied several times. We know many stories of very promising writers like him that ended up dying in Gaza, whether it's in a genocide or perhaps through suicide, because those exit visas never came. So I think this sort of like making sure that his students knew what it meant to be writing, in Walid Daqqa's words, and I'm paraphrasing here, to sort of, go beyond the barbed wire and go beneath the sort of concrete, and not as Walid Daqqa would say, not as a delusion, but because that's what writing did. It promised a reality of Palestine that was beyond the conscription of the Zionist entity and what it meant for that. So I think for me, when I think about Refaat's psychic militancy, there's a way in which that becomes central. And Basil al-Araj is front of my mind here, right? When he talks about al-mufakkir al-mushtabak, the engaged intellectual. Refaat was that, this idea that you can't be committed to the political project of liberation and not have every part of your being also be engaged in that. There is no separation between the political act of writing that is in service of the liberation of Palestine and anything else. And I think he's so beautifully embodied that, like understood what Basil meant, that there's no point in all of our words and our art and our commitments if this is not toward a larger aim. And I think there's something really beautiful about that. And what I'll say to what Nora said, what Louis said, is, sometimes folks, especially when they're assassinated or murdered in these grotesque ways, just like Ghassan Kanafani was, might sort of take, like, people heroize them and say they're such great people. And Refaat actually was. There's not one person I know that knew him in Gaza or across Palestine that have not said how generous and good of a human being he was, right? And so I think there's something also about us remembering who the targets of this aggression have been. And that is why he was militant and is sort of responding in his truth-telling about this. And Nora, I'm just sort of like, this idea of the change of tenor. I remember, I think it was the last interview you all did with him. And his also ability on Twitter, all that, to continue telling the truth, to say, this is who's responsible for this, right? Despite seeing it, despite potentially the fear he felt, the sort of the terror that's involved in living under those conditions, is also never forgetting that part of this is naming consistently, right? This isn't just an arbitrary position that folks like him have been put in. This is a targeted machine of genocide that is armed to the teeth by US empire and happens to be an eliminatory machine that is a Zionist one that is based on the elimination of Palestinian people. Refaat, just like other folks, is one way you can directly impact people psychologically. Because losing people like Refaat, right, not only does a number on the texture of the sort of interwoven relationality in Gaza, but also says these folks know exactly who to go after. So the people who speak to our soul, who mobilize emotion in a particular way, who have a way with words, who narrate our life story, who are generous, who have also created and animated generations of thinkers and people who can speak about Palestine and commit to keeping the story of Palestine central. Of course you target and assassinate them, right? And so I think that for me is like his militancy in some ways also, just like every fucking failure of the Zionist genocidal machine, they think that targeting a person and murdering them, we're left with that loss, but they don't get what it means that these people have imprinted on everybody, what the after effect is, what it actually mobilizes afterwards. And that's the searing part, right? I think, Nora, you were just like, to keep feeling this. I've been thinking so much lately about being seared and staying seared. And what does that mean to carry that with us? I think his, if I must die, in many ways also is a commitment or an articulation. In my mind, it's a love letter also to like a truth telling about what risk is involved. And I think, Louis, you mentioned this, like he and Ghassan both could have lived a life that mitigated some of that risk, but the commitment to a liberatory struggle is one in which somebody can contend with the necessary risk. This is the engaged intellectual that doesn't just intellectualize things, but understands death is always imminent when we fight liberation struggles. As much as life, as you're producing life, as you're writing, as you're animating life, you're also recognizing that death might be part of that. And this is what I mean about the searing of it. Like, for us to hold that is also us to commit to a truth telling of the mechanics of the world of violence, but not stop there in despair. I don't think that was the point, right? Like you said, Jared, where he ended up was sort of like, let this do what it's supposed to do. And I think the continued mobilization past that, and if that can happen because we are seared by him, because we are seared by his words, because we can never, nor should we, forget that this genocide has happened and who did the genociding, that's part of how we continue that forward, rather than sort of run away from that, right? And I think for me, this is what I'm holding, and there are contradictions to that, and it might feel like shit to feel like, oh, I'm being seared, and I'm gonna sit in that. But for me, I continuously think about searing as a commitment to revolutionary love that Che talked about, that Leila Khaled talked about, the tenderness that's involved in that, because you do risk a part of yourself in feeling that and committing to that. It doesn't allow us to engage in disavowals. These systems of violence, and particularly apartheid or settler colonialism and Zionist aggression relies on us disavowing truth at every moment. And that's, I think, just to sort of end up. And when Refaat's tone changes, when we see that last video with Electronic Intifada, when we see his writing, he's sort of calling us in to the space of non-disavowal. Like, part of us must continuously name precisely the mechanics that are in front of us, so that it's not just people like him, people in Gaza, who have to carry that responsibility. And I think this is where I would connect it to the fundraiser. And I'm so glad that, Louis, I really appreciate you saying that this is not representative and that there are real people on the other end of this. So this is one of many. We certainly don't, this is not about like prioritizing. It's about saying, let this be a portable example. If you are donating to this cause, think about others, like Lifeline for Gaza. Continuously update the fundraisers that haven't gotten any money. So just to sort of keep that in what it means to be committed in all the ways, right? In materially, psychically, affectively, and of course that all of that is part of a larger political project. So thanks again, everybody. I see that we're making good headway, and that makes me really happy.
Yeah, I think Benji's keeping a kind of running total for us. I'm actually going to kick it to Renee, because I know, Renee, you have somewhere that you need to be at 6:30, and then we'll come back to Benji. But before I do that, I do want to say some folks have asked, and so we want to help out with this, that they've subscribed to Psychic Militancy, but is Resistance is Fertile channel back up? And I just want to make sure people know that no, Benji and Resistance is Fertile are still banned from YouTube, but they have not stopped their work, and you can still follow it. And I suggest you do. And, you can get all of their episodes on Substack. And so that is the Substack for Resistance is Fertile. Benji can, when he comes back up in a minute, can also, let you know other ways. But I think that's the best way for you to follow all of the work that they do now. And I think that is also really important, right? Because these platforms are going to try to, demonetize, to kick us off, to give us strikes, to repress some of the things that we have to say when we're telling the truth all of the time. And so it's important for all of us to, show some solidarity with each other, and also to take those extra steps and, find different ways to follow and support the projects that get your this media work that we're all engaged in from. And so, yeah, I just wanted to say that. But again, Renee, I want to give you a chance to jump in here. I know that you are not approaching this as a psychic militant, or as well, you are a psychic militant, but that's not your field. And I know you didn't have a close personal relationship with Refaat, but I love that, when I reach out to you and ask you to come on and do these things with us, that you were always, down to show up. And I think that, it represents a kind of solidarity and a willingness to always step into, all of these different spaces and to promote what different people are doing, that I think connects into your work as an organizer, and as a political educator yourself. And so really honored to have you here with us as well today.
Thank you. So I always feel like woefully like unprepared whenever Jared's like, come do this thing. And I'm like, well, of course, like if it's going to support a family or a cause, or, show solidarity in any way, I'm always going to say yes, as long as the dog's not barking and the 15-year-old doesn't need a ride somewhere. And so, but as always, like JW gives me like partial information. He didn't forewarn me that Nora was going to be on. So I had to like take a moment to like be giddy and to be goofy. But, these moments of, this has been like these past few years have been really, really like hard, right? So for folks who don't know me and who don't listen to me carry on Saturdays, my uncle was killed by the police when I was 6 years old. And it's had a long-standing effect on my family that I actually was unaware of, because I did not know the full story until I was an adult, until after George Floyd was killed, and then I found out. And so for me, all of these situations of oppression and imperialism and capitalism, all these things like hit in a way that I never fully know like how to manage, like helping people, right? Like, how do you get somebody to understand what the real core of the problem is, right? And so, you know, as part of the work, I ended up making that map of the cop cities that went kind of nuts, that was totally unexpected, because I was doing it really just so there was a visual to understand like how over policed we are in this nation, right? And so I'm grateful to you, Jared, for inviting me, because it's, you know, these spaces are not spaces where I ever expect myself to be. And I have so much respect for everyone that's on the screen. And, but I think the thing that I can do best is be the person who shows everyone else that you can be in solidarity in any way that you can possibly be in solidarity, right? Like, I don't have, due to some reasons that I at some point hope that I can go public with, I don't have a job right now. And so being able to like financially give all over the place is just not doable, right? And so, you know, I try my best to support in small ways where I can. But for me, a lot of this is really finding ways to stand in solidarity, to stand on truth, right? To never be the person who backs down, to never be the person who's afraid to say like, this is fucked up, right? So like Lara, part of the reason that she and I vibe so well is because the big joke is like my sweatshirt that I'm always wearing everywhere that looks really pretty and very colorful, but says Israel's a settler colony. So it takes a minute for people to like understand what I'm wearing when I'm food shopping, right? Like, and I wear it walking the dog, and I wear it to Whole Foods, and I wear it to like wherever, because I just don't care if people are offended by the reality of that situation. So I don't, when I wear my keffiyeh everywhere, because I now have like 3 of them, and just like, you know, like I don't care if people are like, why are you wearing, like, I don't care about offending people anymore. I care about knowing that my small bit of effort to physically, visibly, vocally, in any way that I possibly can, show solidarity to other people who are also oppressed, and to make it clear that all of our paths are linked because we're all being oppressed by the same fucking people, right? Like, that's what I care about. And so, you know, despite me not knowing Refaat, and I also only really am aware of his story because of Electronic Intifada. That's where I, you know, my heart breaks in any situation where I know that people have felt the pain that my family has felt, because we're living in a place where, for whatever reason, the powers that be, those with the control, those with the money, all seem to think like it's okay for them to determine who's human and who's not human, for them to determine whose humanity is worth keeping and whose can be thrown away. And I can't participate in that shit anymore. Like, I can't, you know, even in losing my job, every now and again, like, I worry about the money, but then at the same time, I'm like, I can fucking sleep. Like, I'm not part of this, like I'm not a cog in this wheel of bullshit where like I have to like pretend, right, in any way, shape, or form that I don't know what I know. Because once you learn some shit, you can't unlearn it. Like, period. So I'll end with like encouraging people, read some shit, right? Go watch some shit, go listen to some shit. I had to pause Lara's new show so I could make sure I was on time for this. I'm about to go in a little while and get on my planning call to make sure I don't fuck up my presentation on imperialism tomorrow night. So, all these things, they're all connected, and it is imperative that anybody who hears this, sees this, watches it later, whatever, understand that your struggle is my struggle. My struggle is your struggle. My struggle is Nora's struggle. My struggle is Benji's. Like, all of our struggles are fucking connected in ways that we are never going to disconnect them. And it is imperative that we all listen, we learn, we read, and most of all, that we don't stop fighting, right? Like, it's hard to be brave, but fuck, man. If we could all be brave, maybe some of this shit would stop. And I'll end there.
See, you always sell yourself short, Renee. That was fantastic. Thank you so much. And yeah, I mean, people, if I often think, I bet not as many people read Refaat's work too as have shared his name or one of his poems or, a line or something like that too. And if you are looking for things to read, both his book, If I Must Die, which was published, after his assassination, but includes a bunch of great written pieces, some poetry, some interviews actually with Nora and Ali and Asa at Electronic Intifada, and just great stuff, as well as Gaza Writes Back, right, which he edited, and then there's work of many others that he has, that are connected, right, because they were his students or so on and so forth. And so anyway, encourage people to also engage with his work if you have not, or just go watch his interviews. And actually, Louis, I know you mentioned quite a few things in your discussion, but I would love if you drop those links in the private chat. I'll try to add them to the show description so people can go see that lecture of his and connect to the piece also that you wrote about him and Ghassan Kanafani and so on. Benji, I'm sorry to leave you to last, certainly not least. Look forward to hearing your reflections, my friend.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much, not for having invited me, because I sort of invited myself when I heard about this fundraiser. So thank you very much for having letting me barge into this stellar company. It was important for me to be part of this fundraiser, not because I know Refaat, I didn't. I only knew him through the Electronic Intifada and watching his interviews, and I will always remember the last interview. And there was just something about Refaat that I think stood out to me, touched me as he was alive. The moment I heard of his death, I put a kite in my Twitter handle, which is still there and will be as long as I'm on Twitter, which is something I'm kind of considering at the moment, how long that will be. But there is really something, and I was kind of browsing through his Twitter timeline, which is still there, and it's quite evocative what we see in there, except I just lost it somehow. I had put it up somewhere, right? So the pinned one is the If I Must Die poem, and the second one is the Democratic Party and Biden are responsible for the Gaza genocide perpetrated by the Zionist entity whose name I will not pronounce if I can help it. And another thing also that, he stood up very early on against all these absolutely revolting false rape allegations, which I found personally particularly disgusting. It's one of the most depraved things that the entity has done in terms of the psychological war, and of course is fighting gallantly against the ridiculous Barry Weiss, and making the joke about the baked baby if it had been baked with baking powder, and Barry Weiss basically painting a target on his, well, I was going to say on his back, but on his forehead for that. And she is actually the intellectual author of his death. There is no doubt about it. And this is something we must remember and keep in mind. Barry Weiss actually is the person who fingered Refaat to be killed by the Zionist entity. But we had this young guy, Mohammed. People who watch Resistance is Fertile, I've seen some of his reports from Gaza, and he was a student also at Refaat's University, and he shared a story with me of how he had actually joined Refaat's class in poetry, although he hates poetry. And I have to confess that I also find poetry extremely boring to read, and that's one of my limitations. But he had joined the class just to be with this extraordinary teacher. So that's the kind of aura that Refaat had and still has. And there is something about some people that just reverberates through time. And Louis mentioned, of course, Hassan Kanafani, which I decided to honor today with my T-shirt. And Refaat is one of those people. But also we are here because of the fundraising aspect of the thing, and it just so happens that I got roped into those small fundraisers in no small part, I have to say, because of seeing Louis post fundraisers since almost the beginning of the, I wouldn't call it the genocide, the acceleration of the genocide, the Holocaust phase of the genocide. And so I was invited to this small Twitter group. And in this group was actually the person who was raising all this money and didn't give it to Refaat's family, which is heartbreaking. But I think also says something about, colonization, about exploitation, about how it's okay for us. And, I think the tragedy is the guy who did it isn't like a professional scammer. He probably thought it was going to help and then got roped, I don't exactly know what happened, but I think it's really a symptom of this Western colonizer mind. And Louis, you pointed out to this other phenomenon that has really gotten to me, that people have made a name for themselves. They've made followings for themselves. Some people are even selling effing workshops, to learn about Palestine, as if you could, for free, learn everything that, you could ever dream of learning, and sometimes regretting to have learned. I've learned more about Palestine. I've been following Palestine since 1981, and I've learned more about it in the past 2 years than I ever thought I could learn, and I've only scratched the surface. All this, of course, without paying any stupid workshop person to do it. But just making a name for yourself on the back of it. And when we started Resistance is Fertile, which we did start, deliberately to look and arm people against the psychological war dimension of what is going on, because in case you don't know, there's a psychological war going on. It's going on all the time, and you've been roped in it. You have no choice in it. And your mind, what you think, your mood is actually the target. And there are two things you can do, basically. You can either do things that nourish the spirit of resistance, or things that deplete it. Or on the other side, you can also do things that inflate the ego of the colonizers, or do things that deflate their narcissism and their ego. And it doesn't matter whether you agree with it, whether you signed up to it. This is what happens. And when Tufan al-Aqsa, this amazing operation for the ages, I think probably one of the most amazing guerrilla actions in the history of anti-colonial struggles so far happened, I just knew I was going to speak up. And I don't care if I speak up to people, but not just speak up, do something that makes a material difference. And I believe very strongly that what makes a material difference is, on the one hand, nourish the spirit of resistance in each and every one of us. And that spirit of resistance lives in the heart of every single human being when we realize that, in contrast, in opposition to what we've been taught, that there are people who are more human than others or less human than others, that they are, I don't know what, races, religions, whatever you call it, that are more than and others less than, is that this is actual complete bullshit. When you look into the eye of another human being, you can recognize common humanity. You don't grant it, you don't prove it, you don't discuss it. You either recognize it or you don't. And if you recognize it, then you reach the point, you become one of the free people of the world, as Abu Ubaidah so eloquently called all of us. And there's a free person of the world in the heart of each and every one of us. And it is our job to nourish that person. And as a psychologist, I work to help people decolonize from the false selves that their history has built for them, so that they can self-determine who they are, of course, within the constraints of this imperialist death machine, and take their history with them and be whoever they want to be. And that right is for everybody. So we can do that. And we have to be very careful when we're on social networks and stuff. Everything we put out is ammunition in that psychological war. So I believe we need to think, okay, does that nourish the resistance or does that deplete it? And another thing we can do for all of us Westerners who materially benefit from that, accumulation by waste, by destruction, by structural or even active genocide and Holocaust, is by giving money to the victims of the system, and in particular in Gaza, because, if we support the population, then we allow the resistance to be like a fish in the water. We need to put nutrients in that water, and it doesn't matter how much we put. Like there was someone in the chat of Resistance is Fertile and Substack today telling how they contributed 800 British pounds lately to Gaza, and another one saying, oh, this is putting me to shame. No, it's not putting you to shame. Every penny, every pound you send is your way of nourishing the resistance. And someone in Gaza seeing $1 on their fundraiser knows that $1 is what you could give. It's not an insult. They know exactly what it means. And you're keeping the resistance alive in that particular way. So I think, I'm particularly happy to be part of this, because that's the one thing we can do. And every time we contribute, we are part of that thing. So like when people subscribe and give money to Resistance is Fertile, because I have a day job, I'm a psychologist in, occupied Turtle Island, I make a comfortable living. I add 50% to what they give, and I send it to the Gaza fundraisers. It's not much, I wish, maybe I want to do more. One day our friend Justin Porter said, give until it hurts. And I think Justin is onto something, we must aim to give until it hurts, because that's the material thing we can do. And also another reason why I'm really happy to be here, and not just so that we can, we Westerners caused that swindle in a way, it's the way we carry on in the world that allowed this person to raise money for Refaat's family and then scam them. So I think it behooves us to fix it. And I'm so happy that, we stand up and fix it. Of course, don't think that because there was one scammer, all those things are scams. Every time you give directly to Gaza, your money goes much more directly than when you give to one of those NGO where, it goes to the NED or to some bureaucrat somewhere living comfortably. So that's what I wanted to say. And I wrote something, but then I can't read my handwriting, which is a problem. Oh yeah, I think what we do materially, and what we do when we speak to, in the spirit of nourishing the resistance, with the intention of nourishing the resistance, it's not just, as Lara very justly said, being seared and carrying that searing piece. Oh, I wanted to tell you another thing. There is a very difficult, very painful, and very frightening health situation in my family. And I have 4 small Gaza fundraisers, and the people ask me how I'm doing. And so I told them. And this lady I am raising money for, she's trying to get enough money to buy a tent for her newborn. She just gave birth not a month ago, right? And she heard about what happened to my partner, and she said, I pray that God heals her. My brother, if you need the money, please don't hesitate to use the donation link for the hospital. I'm trying to help with anything because you helped me before in the worst situation. So this is the kind of people that are being scammed, or this is the kind of people that we are forgetting because what? Because there's been a ceasefire in which the resistance ceases and the Zionists continue to fire. It makes no sense that, we forget them. So please give generously, give until it hurts, and no amount is too small. No word is too small. No kefir wearing at the mall is too small. Every little bit of this adds up to nourish the spirit of resistance in each and every one of us, and brings the death of this empire one day closer. And Nora, you had this beautiful formula where you say, what keeps me going is every morning I wake up and I know we are one day closer to the end of this genocidal entity, by which I don't just mean the Zionist entity, by the way. I mean this effing settler colonial death machine that's been ravaging the planet for the past 500 years. And thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Benji. I'm going to kick it over to our other co-host of this, Sina. We haven't heard from you in a while, brother. What do you have to say? You're muted again.
I'm not used to this.
Sina's a great producer, but he doesn't do it himself.
Yeah. Somebody once said that. Somebody once said to me, Sina, that it's a running gag that you have, that every time that you're on one of these, that you intentionally keep your mic muted.
No, it's that like something goes wrong, and it actually happened again today, but we won't talk about it. Something usually goes wrong because I wait until I'm recording, and I'm like, I'm going to try something new because I like to do that. So that's usually what happens. I guess earlier on, at the beginning, I was kind of like, I don't know, I was just kind of like wanting to say something about the culture of where we are in terms of like giving, and the sort of strange, surreal world of like skirting around this blockade to deliver like the basic necessities to this like population of 2 million people. So it was just kind of like the absurdities of that. But I was thinking more in terms of, listening to this and thinking back. Obviously, I didn't know Refaat. He followed me on Twitter, my greatest accomplishment in life, possibly one of like top 5. He followed me. And I sent him a comment once. I sent him like we had like a brief exchange. But I just think about the fact that like, we have so many intellectuals in this culture, in this Angloid culture. And 99.999% of them aren't worth like the very, I don't know, plastic on the keyboards they use to like update a metaphor. It's a completely useless, feckless class of people. The few who stood up against this monstrous moment in our human species. They get squished like a bug in an insane McCarthyist, I mean, that's what, yeah, it's so, and it happened at the beginning. Nobody got, in a normal world, Refaat would be mourned by like Penn and all the big lib orgs, but like, where are they? Like, what is this? What happened to, like, speak truth to power? It turns out all that was horseshit. They didn't mean it. They were like, unless Israel does it, then don't say anything. Like, oh, look who it is. Look who it is. Oh my God.
And say hi.
Who is it? Hi.
Special
Hi.
guest.
Oh my God. He's the real guest host.
The star.
Oh, young cherub. So yeah, like we live in this absurd space, right? Where the very thing that got him murdered out in the open, which was standing up to the Zionists and like breaking their narrative and questioning them. If we lived in a normal sphere, he would be celebrated, his life would be remarked upon, but we don't. We live in this absurd, psycho-Zionist, genocidal, extremely frightened, invisible gag order running, so like it's up to us weirdos, freaks, to remember to cite his legacy, to build his legacy, to work around it. And just the fact that like one Refaat equals like 10,000 humanities professors. The MLA couldn't even do a boycott. It couldn't even censure Israel without taking it down. Now the members voted for it, but the freaking authoritarian regime, MLA is Modern Languages Society, like Modern Languages Association. It's a completely irrelevant, useless org. Anyone who's listening to this who's in it, pull your money out. It's completely useless. And it just proved how they didn't mean any of that stuff. And for me too, the absurdity of all this is that you think about all of the like courageous Iranian intellectuals, registered trademark, whatever, that they throw at you every 6 months. And I know this from like life in Toronto, because Toronto is like a big destination for these obnoxious libs. They all get like jobs. Nobody ever cares about them ever again because they already serve their function. But imagine if like even one fraction of that goodwill to like dissident thinking was granted to Palestinians. You're not, right? And so we, again, like as has been pointed out many, many times, like this moment, the story of Refaat, this insane story of this man who was murdered out in the open, and then she's been elevated to like the cream of the crop of like editorial control over like the major US news institution. Like, did I just say that out of my mouth? Did that just come out of my mouth? Or am I like stuck in the plot of like some third-rate Bond movie? Like, no, I'm not. This is called reality. This is called America in 2026, where murderous psychos, nobody failed daughters like Bari fucking Weiss, whom nobody likes, gets parachuted into a job at the head of like an important node of control over information over society. So like, aside from the fact that like they're destroying their own institutions as they do this stuff, because who's going to care about, and that's precisely what she started doing. She did that thing in 60 Minutes or whatever. But it's also about destroying any intellectuals, any journalists, any figures who challenge it, who question it. And yeah, like this, we all have to take note. We all have to take note of who kept quiet. We all have to take note. And even then, like the word, that's easy, right? To like point out, God, you know whose Twitter I was on the other day? It's been a while, actually. It wasn't the other day, but that obnoxious... Okay, I won't say her name. Okay, I'm not going to do that. It's okay. We're not going to go there. I'll tell you guys later after the chat. She's so obnoxious. But it's just like this whole machinery of lib concern that gets marshaled into existence the moment an enemy country gets, there's anxiety over it. And of course, they're running this op again in Iran, where you're supposed to be concerned for some abstract protesters, and Zionists, bloodthirsty Zionists who have been genociding their way for the last freaking 2 years, cheering it along, are like, oh my God, here's this random fictional Iranian who died, a martyr to the truth. And it's like, do you think we buy this? Like how? And then you realize, they never meant it. That was true. But it was never intended to land, that it's part of some absurd freaking vaudeville theater that we're all stuck watching, that we're not allowed to boo, because if you do, you'll get shot by the freaking Einsatzgruppen for Israel advocacy. So this is where we are, right? So you replicate yourself in these forums, you connect with people who are like-minded, and you spread your message. So this is what literature is for. This was the whole point. Refaat was doing the engaged intellectual, public intellectual thing. It's just that he's Palestinian and he's an indigenous person, and that's not like valued in our racist settler society. So yeah, that's basically it. And so like one thing that I will reiterate is that the way to break the blockade is that this isn't an actual gag order, right? You can still speak. It's just they bully you into not speaking. They make you feel like it's criminal to speak. So just don't feel criminal, right? They're the criminals. They are the criminals. And if they call you a criminal, you call them back a criminal. And if they fire you, who fucking cares? Because if you were in a position where you had to sacrifice your political and ethics and moral ethics for some paycheck, then yeah, like that's not, then clearly your job isn't worth it. You could find another one and you'll live and you'll be fine. But yeah, as Renee said, you won't be able to keep your conscience if you do keep it. And quite frankly, like a lot of people I know, from grad school, they've kept quiet in all this, and they made their careers talking about radical queer Palestinian film directors, and yet when this moment came up, is that you realize that there are these professional bounds in everything that we do, and I'm like Westoid life. That the bounds of respectability are like some cricket boundary, right? That's like not actually there, but everybody knows where it is, right? That like you don't actually see it, but it's like incredibly visible. So like that for me is this insane spectacle, part of the spectacle here. And yeah, every now and then they like try to pretend they care about Iran after like threatening to nuke it. And that even like makes me go crazier. But yeah, that's something that's been bugging me. I do want to thank all of you for everything. I haven't really contributed much. I've been fussing in the back here, but this has been a really good conversation, and I've been in my own chat managing it, and we should do these more often.
Absolutely. It's been great. Thank you for the Sina rant that everybody was waiting for, Sina. It's not one of these until we get one of those. I know we're kind of going to wind down here in a few. I will replug once again the kind of reason that we are all here, which is to support this fundraiser for Refaat Alareer's family. I don't know exactly. I think we're over 3,000 raised now. Is that right, Benji? Yeah. So that's wonderful. And I would just encourage anybody who has not given or feels that they can give a little more, or to Benji's comment by way of Justin, it doesn't hurt yet, then maybe, give a little bit more. But yeah, I mean, it's been wonderful to be in community again with all of you tonight for this discussion. It's sad that it was that we're here under these circumstances trying to kind of right a wrong. But again, that's that we can do these things, right? And I think that's it's meaningful, and I appreciate all of you and your platforms, you making the time and sharing this conversation with folks. And again, this is not to like pat ourselves on the back. I actually would love to see, and we talked about this, more groups doing stuff like this, more podcasts, more folks, as Benji was saying, who have, built a following, or who do, work around these kind of struggles and these, what become, tragedies in a lot of ways, but, ones that are man-made, right? Made by imperialism, that folks show up in different ways. And, so again, we should say to other podcasters and stuff like, we're happy to have you join us or to take up your own efforts on that. Yes, it's wonderful that we're at 3,000. Thank you very much.
Shay, play the air horn sound effect. We need it.
Do I have that? Let me see.
Oh my God. You spent every day on here at StreamYard. You don't play the air horn?
Where is that on here? Let me see.
Oh my God, you're fired.
I know I'm a boomer when it comes to this thing.
Do, 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 do.
There's a gong.
We're getting closer.
I could play some dance pop. Apparently, I don't think I'll do that. But anybody want to say any other remarks in the last 20 minutes or so?
I just want to thank you all again, and I'm happy. I'm down for whatever, whenever. This is great. I really appreciate all of your work, and salute to all of you. And I'm glad we were able to make something happen.
No,
I'm
very appreciated.
You know?
I mean, you all. I just to your credit too, Jared. I mean, like within like 5 minutes of me asking a couple days ago, you were like, yes, and we can stream it on both Black Liberation Media and I Mix What I Like. And I yeah, it's wonderful that.
I mean, but this is easy, and my kids have all the cars, and I don't have anywhere to go, and nothing. I can't leave if I wanted to. So I mean, I'm like, what else am I going to do? So no, but no, of course, any honestly, any time for whatever. This is great, and I agree. We should, and I'd like to see others, to the extent I don't know they're happening, do this kind of work. And again, I just want to reiterate how much I appreciate what I've learned from everybody on the screen over the years. I am woefully ignorant to many of the issues and details of this particular wing of that global genocidal project that Benji, you were talking about a minute ago. So yeah, and it's again, this is the easy work. I think it's what we all did all of this to be able to do in the first place. So right on.
Yeah, if I may make another comment, I think one thing is really important, and you mentioned, Sina, the invisible cricket boundaries. And I think what's really interesting, and Renee kind of alluded to this, and I saw it in the chat also, is once you move past those boundaries, then you create space for other people. Like I'm absolutely, I started speaking up publicly, but I was kind of quiet in my professional life. Now I go everywhere with my kefir. I even wear it when I see clients, and if they don't like it, it's okay. They can go see another psychologist. And I talk to my colleagues about what I do.
There are many they can see.
Yeah, and yeah, right. And there is like, you're creating space and people are saying, yes, I agree, that's so good. And so there is no action that is too small. There is no word, there is no water cooler talk that is irrelevant. I think it's important. It's one way to nourish the spirit of resistance, that every little thing counts. You're not too small. Refaat said in his last interview, I believe it was, that if they did come for him, he would just take his exacto pen. No, exacto is what I would use. Exacto is what I would go and fetch, but the pen,
expo marker,
expo markers, right? Expo markers, and throw them at the Zionists. And I think there's something very important in that. Each and every one of us, we do what we do, and with what we do, where we do it, in the way we do it, we can make a difference. We can nourish that spirit of resistance both in us and in others. And when we give to those fundraisers, we connect with that. So I think that's why it's so important. We make a material difference, but we also make it with our words online, but with our words also IRL, as people terminally online tend to say.
Can I just add just quickly after that? There's a reason why that expo marker is so important. And I think there's something about us gathering here as comrades that's part of that. It's about transforming material possibilities, right? That like the expo marker, like the spoon, becomes representative of a possibility for liberation that colonizers can't understand under conditions which they think they've created to shut down every potential possibility to dream of a life that's any different. Yes. Nora's, everybody look at Nora's tattoo, Nora's ink. You know, that's the point. And the reason why I'm connecting it here and why this is important is I think there are ways, I mean, some of us have met in person. Most of my comrades that I'm committed to the struggle with, I've not.
Yeah.
And I think we live in a world that might make us believe that struggle and organize has to be in person. Is that wonderful when I do get to see my comrades? Yes, it's fantastic and there's nothing like it. And also, there are modes of resistance and connection and life-making that defy those borders, just like an expo marker is a weapon against the aggressor. And this is not just a metaphor. It is about what does it mean for us to transform and disrupt all the ways Fanon used to call it, every mode of incarcerative thinking. That's part of the transformation. And I think us coming together and having these conversations and sort of actually being in comradeship, irrespective of whether we live in proximity or not, is also what we're talking about. So like, do it with comrades, and make sure that you outlive the Zionist entity.
That's right.
That's the number one reason. That's my number one anti-suicide talk. You know, you're not gonna die. You're not gonna kill yourself before the Zionist entity goes.
That's right.
Thank you for politicizing that, because I've made it selfishly personal. Like, the only reason to stay at all in health is so I can be at my enemies' funerals with a drink in my hand.
That's right.
So I'm, so thank you for making it appropriately, that's, have some water, take a walk.
I got you, brother. I got you.
All right.
But it is that connection. It is that, I think that, like, going into 2026 and already, 6 days in, we're seeing such horrific expressions of imperialism and colonialism. And, we're heading into we're now in the third year of this genocide that is ongoing. And now, like, at this like lower tenor, but it's obviously still there, and it's entrenching, and it's not going anywhere, and they're going to keep just grinding this genocide out. And I think in order to keep ourselves energized for the fight ahead, and there will be many fights, we have to seek community, we have to seek connection, we have to deepen our connections to the people that nourish us. And I'm resolved to getting out of the house more to see people IRL, but also deepening the connections that I have with people who are halfway across the world and who I might never meet in person. And I think it's really important to also remember that that's a part of the process of breaking alienation, which capitalism strives to keep us in a system of. And breaking all forms of alienation is revolutionary, and we have to keep ourselves and our comrades close and pull them even closer in these really, really brutal times.
Absolutely. I think that is a wonderful place for us to wrap up. As folks have saying, like, of course, like, share, subscribe, join an organization, agree with all of that, contribute again to the fundraiser if you have or have not. Also, good shout outs to a lot of the programming that different folks have. Black Liberation Media has a morning show that you can check out every, weekdays. And, of course, the Saturdays with Renee. Shout out to Renee for joining us. IMIXWHATILIKE. All kinds of conversations going on there all the time. Resistance is fertile. Multiple programs
Monday
every
mornings
week.
now, yeah. We're live Monday morning, 9:30 ET, and then we have multiple programs pre-recorded.
we have to get Sina his New Year's resolution is to do some episodes of his own podcast because he's been producing the 17 other ones that he works on, including psychic
just burst
militancy.
mine. Yes.
Go check out the newly launched Psychic Militancy. Always
Anti-Imperialist
into...
Scholars Collective is really good too.
Yes.
Absolutely.
We have a live tomorrow for Psychic Militancy at 11 a.m. Eastern Time with Geomar and Alex Avinia about Venezuela. So please tune in.
That'll be great. We also have a conversation with Alindra Chavez tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. And then, of course, make sure to check out the Electronic Intifada live streams, check out the website, read the articles that come out. And Louis Allday. I mean, again, I know I shout out Louis whenever I get the opportunity, but really amazing work with Liberated Texts and the books that are coming out through Ebb Books. Did an interview with him a few weeks ago that folks can check out on our channel. But great, as folks I'm sure gathered, we need to get him out more. He needs to get on more shows and speak out more because he's a great speaker as well. But does a lot of wonderful work as a publisher and an editor. And did I shout out everybody? I also want to shout out
the chat. The chat also. Yeah, the chat was stellar today.
The chat. I don't know that I did at front, and I did mean to shout out Adnan Hussein, who also wanted to be here, but is going through his own health struggle right now. Solidarity to him, and much appreciation for the work that he does on the Adnan Hussein show, Guerrilla History, and all of those good folks over in that orbit, and just a bunch of other folks, but much appreciation for everybody and the chat and all the people who donated today, where we got in over, let's see, well, I don't know exactly, but $3,200 at least. And so thank you for that. That's amazing and, means a lot. So really glad that we were able to make that happen today. So thank you all. And thank you to, again, my co-hosts and co-panelists. This was great.
Thanks so much.
Free Palestine.
Peace, everybody.
Free Palestine.